All right. Welcome, Anna Hunter, partner CFO for Rankin McKenzie. So pleased to talk to you today. Thanks for making time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about a recent survey done of the partners at Rankin McKenzie that shed some light onto remote work trends. And one of the interesting things that came to light is that so many Rankin McKenzie partners are paired with local or regional businesses, but still find themselves working more than half of the time remotely because the teams they're working with are working remotely. And I was hoping you could just tell us how the landscape has shifted over the last few years and sort of the current role of remote work and how to be an effective remote executive here in 2024.
Sure. Well, of course, technology has helped shifted the work from home capabilities for us. Most all tools are in the cloud now. Um, and then COVID has had a big change on that as well. And I think people are finding one, we can gain some more efficiencies working part time at home. Um, as well as we can still build those relationships while being part time at home through Zoom or our video chat tools, as well as being on the phone. I think at my most recent partner meeting, my partner survey said that about 50 to 60% of their time is spent working from home. Um, One of my other partners and I are 100% remote, but the rest of my partners are in office 40 to 50% of the time. Um, I think from the clients that I work with, they are kind of a mix, either part time in office for their employees. Um, I work for a lot of SaaS companies, and those are typically lean more heavily towards fully remote, just simply because of the space that they're in. So it's a changing world and a changing landscape. We never would have thought 200 years that everybody would be driving around in cars and flying on planes. And so the same thing 50 years ago, nobody ever would have thought that people would be working from home, video chatting and on the phone, and not in an office sitting at a desk, always um, cheeks in the seat requirement that just isn't there anymore. So, just adapt with the times and do what makes the most sense. And I think it just does make a lot of sense for employers because they can save a lot of money in overhead office space, which is a very costly expense for a lot of employers, as well as you can hire people who you might not be able to have in your location with expertise that you need. You're not limited to just your local geographical area for the people that you need to hire. So there's a lot of advantages to it as well. So just a changing landscape that we're in.
You said in our pre-call that um, remote can work better than in person under the right circumstances. And I think the natural inclination is that that's industry specific. Like you said, SaaS companies and things are more typically all remote, but that's not, exclusively the case. In fact, I believe you said that it has a lot more to do with the culture in place and if the CEO is a remote uh, thinking person or an executive with remote experience. And can you speak more to that? So it's either sort of the CEO is invested in remote or they're not, and that's the determining factor.
Yes. Well, I always say that the tone starts at the top. If the leaders in the organization believe in it and understand it, then it can absolutely work. But I do think that that's an important piece of it. If the owners and the management believe and understand in remote teams, then that's a key piece to the success of remote employees and remote workers. That's the reason why you saw such a big shift during COVID and after COVID, is because a lot of business owners and managers were forced to go remote because people couldn't come into the office. And then they began to see, oh, it actually does work. We're still able to have some productivity from our employees. And so this could actually be a good thing. We could, shift to part time and get a smaller office and reduce our costs. So, yes, I do believe that many businesses, majority of businesses, could be part time remote or fully remote. Now, there's certain industries like restaurant business or smaller local retail businesses. There's some things that just don't make sense to be remote employees, but a lot of businesses, yes, it does make sense to have remote employees, either fully remote or part-time remote working employees. You can do a lot of things with each other, meeting wise, to still connect and build those relationships, and um, even still have quarterly in-person meetings or monthly in-person meetings to still bring people together. Because of course you do miss out on some small things when you're not face to face. But there's a way to balance that shift and that change.
There's a meme I've seen repeated on the internet over the past many months, where the return to office mandates have been talking about, oh, you're missing culture. And of course, the meme is, the person going into the office where no one else is and, videoing the empty workstations and saying, oh, look at all this great culture. And there's nobody there. It's their mandatory 1 day a week in the office or something like that. So I'd love for you to speak to that. Tell me about culture in a remote setting, and what does culture mean, and how do you build culture remotely? Because clearly, um, that's important, and I think it has a lot more to do with the way you work and the agreements that you're making with your colleagues and your direct reports, rather than um, you know huddled at the workstation, or by the proverbial water cooler.
I agree. I mean, I think the new water cooler is our chat tools, whether it's Slack or um, Microsoft or whatever chat tool you happen to use at your business, because that's where they have the general um, conversation that would normally go on during the water cooler. So and so's birthday, or look at my new dog, or so and so's just had a baby. Sharing those kinds of things, or it's Friday night. Um, or Friday afternoon, have a beer, get together, and where I've even seen companies and clients send, boxes to everybody's house for Friday, 4 p.m. social hour, whether it's, cheese and wine or beer, and everybody has a social get together. There are ways to still build culture in our virtual environment, and it can still build a culture that's strong and lasting. And I've seen it in a lot of my clients. And you just have to be willing to be open to it and invest some time and energy in it, and you can see how people build those relationships remotely, and through phone calls, texts, chats, video conferencing, and through those general virtual water coolers. People do learn about each other, and even through monthly, um, like town halls where everybody's on together, and news is shared about people in the company. But like I said, it all begins at the top. The tone starts at the top with the leaders in the organization. If culture matters to them, then they're going to spread that feeling and that culture down through the organization. And the employees will feel it, and they'll build that culture together. And that is partly what will make them stay at the organization and make them feel like they're at a fun place to work. Um, because some generations really do care about that as part of what they want from a job besides just pay. They want to be at a place that has a good culture and a good environment.
Well, and you said, it starts at the top, and as a Rankin McKenzie CFO, you're at the top when you come into these organizations, meaning you typically have direct reports and folks that you are mentoring, folks that are reporting to you, and to the extent that you're doing that remotely, any tips or things that you can share for folks in similar management positions about how do you cultivate your people and help grow your people remotely? And is there anything that's particularly different than the way you used to do that in person, or are they the same?
Well, I would say it's the same, other than, my meetings with them are on Zoom versus in a chair across from a desk. I think, building up employees and cultivating employees in their career involves meeting on a regular basis. One, to ensure that information is shared and passed back and forth, but two, to help mentor them and help share knowledge and help them grow in their career, whether they're becoming new managers. Usually that's what it is. I'm usually helping new managers learn how to manage people, because either they've never done it before or they haven't done it for very long, and they often don't know how to um, either address conflict or how to execute on getting things done in operations. And so those are the kinds of things that I really do enjoy mentoring people on, because it does take time and experience to to learn how to do those things. You can teach anybody skills related to accounting and finance for how to do a process, but teaching people how to interact and work with others, that's a special talent that you kind of learn from experience. And so I do enjoy teaching people how to build their skills as managers and people managers. So I typically do that through time and engaging with them, um, and through watching them with their experience. Sometimes they make mistakes, and we work through that and learn from those mistakes. And what are we going to do next time? Um, and on occasion, if they need help or mentoring doing something together, like, for example, um, writing up an employee improvement plan, if they want someone to sit in with them while they do that, or someone to look at that together, then I can do that with them. I'm usually pretty flexible with my client. It all depends on whether or not they have a strong HR person on staff or not. um, so it varies from client to client, but I tailor what I do based on the client. But I do enjoy working with others and helping others grow in their career, because that's the whole point of working for an organization. One, we want to get a paycheck, but two, we want to grow in our career and advance in our career so that we can move on to the next step, or get promoted, or move to the next level. So those are all things that I enjoy doing in my career.
Well, you mentioned the HR component, and I've heard from several Rankin McKenzie partners that um, many CFOs are more or less involved with the HR and other back office functions of running the company. And I've heard that's more probably the rule rather than the exception. Can you speak to that? Because as an outsider, it's not obvious to me that the CFO would be so involved in the HR aspects of the company, but that seems to be quite typical for our Rankin McKenzie partners.
Well, when you're involved in the company finances, that takes a high level of trust. And so you typically know most everything about the finances and the money of the organization, and sometimes even the owners or the shareholders involved. And so there's a high level of trust that's there between your CFO and the business. And so because of that, you're often included in HR matters. And so it's a common thing for the CFO to be looped in on HR matters. And you don't know that when you go to school and when you become an accountant, but it's something they should share with you up front when you go to school to become an accountant. That if you can either become a CPA in public accounting, or if you move over to industry, you're most likely going to be spend part of your time, at least 25 or 30% of your time in HR as well. So when you're in industry, so it just goes with the territory for being in a position of trust and confidentiality, which when you're involved in the finances and of the organization, you're in a level of trust and fiduciary responsibility. So that's why.
When you put it that way, it makes all the sense in the world, and it should not have been so unexpected, I think. I would love to pivot a little bit and ask you about and maybe a hot take if you have one. Uh, I'd love for you to talk about your role as a woman and mother in this space and how the shift to remote work has changed the landscape for women in this space, which is typically male dominated, like many industries, and what that means for the future, what that means for um, other women coming up through the ranks now, and what that means for your clients, because I think there's some unexpected ways in which that's very beneficial to the client. And I'm obviously thinking about things like flexibility and working at least partly asynchronously, meaning catching up on things in the early hours and the late hours because you're doing it all and quite successfully. I'd love for you to share your perspective on those things if you're so kind.
Sure, sure. Well, that's a lot there, but
Yeah, that was about 10 questions rolled up in one. So
I'll roll it. Initially, I have a 25-year-old son. He's my oldest. So when I initially became a mother, um, I was working at a CPA firm, and it was not something that was common, you know. And when I say that, I mean, in public accounting, it was not common to have young children and be a staff accountant during tax season and audit season. And so that was a bit of a shock for me trying to navigate that. And it was at that time um, that I decided, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't be in public accounting. Maybe it's time for me to shift over to industry because I wanted to also have a family. Since then, I know public accounting has also shifted and changed, just like the rest of the business world, to understand that women are in the workforce and we're not going anywhere. We're here to stay. we're not leaving. So, and we have a lot to offer. Even though we're mothers, we also are intelligent, hardworking, and we can contribute just as much as the men can. So, needless to say, it's like everything, it's a journey and discovery. But yes, I have 3 children, and I only have my youngest now is 10, so it's always a juggle and a struggle, as most mothers know. But I pride myself in being an extreme professional and perfectionist in my work, in my career. And yes, sometimes early morning work. I take my daughter to school every morning. I come home and I work, and I pick her up in the afternoon. And occasionally I might have to take her to dance practice. And then sometimes I'm working in the evenings, and sometimes I'm working on the weekends, and sometimes I take calls at night. And you know, I do have flex time, and my clients know this. And my work goes knows this, but the reality is if I have a deadline, I'm going to meet my deadline. I'm going to get the work done and I find a way to make it happen. I know every day what I have to get done and what my time frame is, and I work everything around that. So having that flexibility for me of not having to drive and be in the car for an hour and a half to 2 hours a day is very important because it allows me that extra focus time to get my work done, and it allows me that extra time to be able to sit in the car line at school and pick up my daughter when I know that time goes by so fast because a few more years I'll be an empty nester, and like many of my partners are already empty nesters, and I'll never get that time back again. I'll be able to work the rest of my life if I want to, if I choose to. Um, but the reality is, I enjoy my work and I'll keep doing it as long as I'm enjoying it. But I also want and desire to have that family balance where I can make my family a priority and focus as well. So, I think that's another reason why I'm very thankful for the ability and the tools to work from home, like the internet. And in fact, this week I had an internet outage at my house for an hour, and I was in a panic, which I haven't had one in several years. And I called my son, and he said, "Mom, you have a hotspot. What are you talking about?" And I said, "Oh yeah." So I turned on my hotspot, and I said, "I'm not even without, even though Spectrum was down for an hour and a half. I turned on my hotspot, and there I was. I kept on working. So there's always where there's a will, there's a way, and that's the way that I view it. And as women, um, we can still contribute just as much as men. And I think it's fun at work, the fact that we have men and women and a lot of different people and different personalities that we can interact together and bring different things to the table. And imagine how boring it would be. I think back in the 1950s, that must have been really boring, having only men in suits. Boring, with all the same, everybody looked the same.
That's what all the cigarettes and booze was for.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was the good old days for them. I don't know, but I think that would be a boring way existence for me. Just like I think their wives at home where they didn't get to go to work, I think that too would be a boring existence for me. But on the other hand, I really admire women who choose to stay home and raise their children because we need those moms too. That's something I admire because that you know we're all different and we're all made differently, and I wasn't made to do that, and that's okay. It's okay that we can all be different and still choose to have a family and still choose um, to have a great life um, in this country.
Well, we're also at the beginning of the sort of era of the stay-at-home dad as well, where women are increasingly working out of the home. They just did a study that came out where men are statistically much more likely to be in remote positions if they're working at all, and women are being doctors like my wife and other executive roles that are still more in person and or lines of business that are still more in person. And I think that's an interesting shift as well. Our 5-year-old was actually at a pediatrics appointment recently, and his pediatrician is female, but had a male medical student with him. And he said, "Who's this guy?" And she said, "Oh, he's training to be a doctor. Is it okay if he sits in?" And my son says, "Boys can't be doctors." It was a wild idea for me. And so there's clearly a shift. If you look at the enrollment numbers at the undergraduate level and across almost all disciplines, and moving forward, the we're definitely experiencing a big shift, and I applaud those of you on the forefront of it when it was less easy. Hopefully, it'll be easier and more accepting moving forward. But there's also, a tremendous amount of benefits.
After every child I had, my husband asked, "Can I be a stay-at-home dad now?" And I said, "No." Not until our retirement account is big enough.
That's right. That's right. As a financial professional, that's a bad, I can tell you that's a bad idea. Those numbers don't make sense.
Yeah.
Um, well, and of course, that there are lots of conversations that that we don't have time for today about the balance of domestic labor and other things that still are disproportionately difficult for I know female executives and for us men too, because we are uh, brought up in a certain way of thinking, and it's so we're all sort of trying to reimagine the future together. At least some of us. Um, so let me end with this because we've actually been speaking of 25 minutes already, and boy, I really appreciate it. What would you say to um, uh, young women in the accounting space now about what their career path might look like if the future they envision is something like yours, or a remote executive role or something like that. Take us maybe from collegiate level. What sort of experiences should they be looking for to position them well for um, a role like you've carved out for yourself?
Well, I think the main thing to consider is you have to like any dream. If you have a dream and it's something that you really want to do, you have to be willing to put in the time and the effort and the work ethic in particular. Um, it was a lot of hard work, a lot of nights and weekends, and getting your certification, and a lot of sacrifice. Um, but don't ever let anybody stop you from fulfilling your dreams, whatever those dreams are, whether it's accounting or whatever other profession you have. Just don't give up and don't stop. And if you have that dream and that desire of a certain career path, map it out, plan it out, and just keep digging away and working towards that. So I think, and you have to be careful not to listen to other people trying to say, oh, you shouldn't do that. It's too hard. It's going to take you too long. If you listen to others, it can sometimes derail your goals and your plans. You have to decide for yourself, what do I want, and then stay determined and keep working towards that. Don't give up and don't let other things get in the way of what your dreams and goals are, because you can accomplish it.
Well said. Well, with that, I thank you for your time today. Hopefully, we'll be able to talk again in the near future, and have a great rest of your week.
Thank you so much.